In this video, we're going to take a look at how accurate the betting markets were for the 2020 presidential election. I already did a video on the 2016 election. Take a look at that one if you'd like. But let's get started. And what we're looking at here is the 2020 Real Clear Politics map based on the final polling. And you can see they had Biden at 319, Trump at 219. Not a bad map, but they did get a couple of states wrong, one in each direction. That's going to be the neighboring states of Georgia and Florida. So let's go through 8 of the close states in that election. First, we've got Arizona, and the final polling on Real Clear Politics had Biden in the lead by almost 1 point. Now, he actually won the state by just over 1 point, but if you look at the timeline on the polls leading up to the election, Biden was ahead in all of them up until right before the election in late October. Then Trump managed to pull ahead, but in the final couple days, Biden regained the lead. So how does that kind of polling affect the market? Well, we're going to use Predicted and see where people are putting their money. So here it is, back in 2020. In September and October, Biden was in the lead, but it was close. The day of the election, it was pretty much tied, but Biden had a 1-cent lead. Then once it became clear that Biden was going to win, it shot all the way in his direction. So this market did seem to closely reflect what the polls were showing. Now let's do Nevada. Biden was ahead by 2.4, and the final results were spot on at 2.4. The couple of months before the election, Biden was ahead in all of them. They narrowed up just a bit right before the election. So how does that translate into the markets? Well, back in September, Biden was ahead in the mid to high 70s, and nothing really changed. On election day, he finally shot all the way up once it was clear he was the winner. Next, we've got Georgia, another state that Biden was able to flip. And this time, Trump had the 1-point lead in the polling, but Biden won it by 0.3%. The polls going back to July showed Trump in the lead all the way up until late September, early October. Then Biden started to win it. Then it went back and forth several times before the election before it finally settled on a slight edge for Trump. With so much volatility in the polling, you might think that could have spooked the markets. But going back to September, Trump did have a small advantage. And here's where we start to see some of the red mirage that a lot of people talk about. On election day, Trump shot all the way up to 92 cents. Then once more ballots were counted and more mail-in ballots trickled in, then right after that, Trump crashed all the way down into the teens. And then there was no looking back for Biden. So that's going to be the first of a few states where Trump shot all the way up on election day and then crashed shortly thereafter. Let's do the Rust Belt. Let's take a look at Wisconsin. The polling here has famously greatly underestimated Trump. This shows it right here. Biden was up almost 7 points, but he won it by 6 points. Less than that, it was by under 1 point. In the entire polling average, Biden was ahead, and it looked like he had no chance of losing the state. If we look at the markets going back about 5 to 6 weeks before the election, then Biden was favored anywhere from the high 60s to the mid 70s. But then on election day, you'll see that it flipped, and Trump had the advantage with 61 cents. But then within a couple of days, everything flipped back, and Biden won the state. What about neighboring Michigan? Well, we can see here that Biden had the advantage by more than 4 points. He won it by less than that. It was only about 2.8. And in the timeline, Biden maintained a lead during the entire lead-up. The market shows pretty much the same thing as Wisconsin. Biden with a healthy lead. On election day, Trump manages to flip it. It was short-lived because a couple of days later, Biden won the state, and the market reflected that. And another state in the former blue wall is Pennsylvania. This one, the Real Clear Politics polling looks like it was spot on. Just over a 1-point lead for Biden. On the timeline, there was never a time where Biden was trailing. Since all the way back in May, he had a 4 to 5 point advantage. It did narrow up just before election day. And then these markets also show Biden with a lead, but it's not completely overwhelming. However, on election day, Trump managed to flip it yet again. He was at 60 cents. Then a day later, it flips back for Biden, and he goes on to victory. And then let's take a look at a couple of states that Trump was able to win. North Carolina had it extremely close. Trump in the average was ahead by 0.2. He won it by 1.3, but if you look at this timeline, it goes back and forth a few times leading up to the election. Even in early November, Biden had a small advantage. So with a lot of back and forth, how is that market going to look? Well, the market also went back and forth going back to August. It was pretty much neck and neck where nobody had a clear lead. Finally, on election day, that's where Trump shot way up and never looked back. The last state we're going to look at is going to be Florida. This one, in the aggregate, the polling was off. Biden was ahead by almost 1 point, but Trump went on to win it by more than 3. So not great polling there, and Biden had a lead the entire time leading up to the election, with the exception of late October, where Trump managed to eclipse him for a couple of days. And what does this market look like? Well, it does go back and forth between Trump and Biden, yet again, similar to North Carolina. About a week and a half before the election, Trump did take the lead for good that time, and then it shot way up on election day. So it's always interesting to see how accurate predictions are when people have their money on the line. And as you can see, there's plenty of times in 16 as well as 20 where people are wrong. Now, 2020 was definitely a unique election. Tons of mail-in ballots. It took days to count. A lot of people were on the edge of their seats not knowing what what's going to happen. I would hope we could get a result on election day this time, or at least in the early morning after. Nobody's going to want to see one side with a lead that ends up changing a few days later. Another thing we might see are some recounts. But when it comes to the markets, they're usually a pretty good barometer for gauging what's going to happen. The problem is that last 5, 10, maybe 15% where they're wrong. That's where all the focus and the tension is going to be. And a lot of times the markets do react to polling. It should not be the only factor, but it's going to be a major contributor. So that's a look at some of the states for back in 2020. You could use different polling aggregates. You could use different markets. Either way, it just goes to show you some of the strengths and weaknesses. It's another fun thing to check out when you're following elections, but definitely be prepared for things to change and for some people to get things wrong. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about the accuracy of the prediction markets in 2020? How much do you care about the markets? Do you put money down? Do you avoid it entirely? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. Join if you'd like to help support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.